Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I am Mayra, and I am so excited to interview today Michael Kushner.
Hi,
And
Mayra.
hello. I want to just let everyone, all our listeners, know who is Michael. So let me tell everyone who Michael is. Michael is an award-winning multi-hyphenate in theater, television, and film industries. He has photographed Patti LuPone, Julie Andrews, Hillary Clinton, and thousands of other artists. He is also the executive producer of the Emmy-nominated series Indoor Boys and currently teaches theater business at Strasberg in New York. Michael's book, How to Be a Multi-Hyphenate in the Theater Business, published by Routledge Publishing, arrived on shelves in the spring, just recently, 2023. He is a member of Actors Equity Association, and wow, you have interviewed Carol Burnett, Rachel Brosnahan, Billy Porter, and many more artists on your podcast, Dear Multi-Hyphenate, where you can listen wherever you download podcasts. Welcome, Michael.
That's me in a nutshell. Help, I'm in a nutshell. I can't get out.
Wow. Well, I am so excited to have you on here. And I just want to talk a little bit about how we met, which was TikTok.
Oh my God, so crazy. So cool.
Yeah. And somehow this was a few years ago that I was just kind of strolling through TikTok and I found one of your videos where you were talking about your connection with the Titanic.
TikTok, TikTok stresses me out, but it has, like, there have been some positives, like bringing me to you. That was amazing. So I can't completely knock TikTok, but so what I did, it was during, I think, the pandemic. It was like maybe a year. I think it was like 2021. And I was sort of experimenting with TikTok, being like, well, got some time, I could edit some videos, whatever. And I was like, I'm gonna share talk about my connection with the Titanic and share what I do every April 15th, which is the day of the sinking. And I shared the video that I go to John Jacob Astor's grave every year, and I sit there and I pay respects because I'm, first of all, a huge history buff, especially when it comes to Titanic, and I'm emotionally drawn to Titanic, and Titanic has followed me throughout my life in so many different ways. So this made perfect sense. It's just something that I do for about 10, 15 minutes. It's really peaceful. The weather is getting nicer after a long winter. And I recorded the video, talked about my experience, hashtagged past life, past lives, past life experiences, Titanic, those things. And that video actually that was the most no, it's actually the second most viral video now. But that was at the time the most viral video I had. And it had like maybe 100,000 views, probably like 150 now or 200,000 now. People still commented on it to this day. It still gets recycled through. And a lot of people came through that were like, I have an emotional connection to the Titanic, or I feel this is so cool. Where is this? Really, people were interested. And also there were, some trolls and stuff like that, whatever. But
Yes.
that life. And so you commented, and I think you said, hi, Michael, I would love to know more about this. I think you said, I do past life regression.
Yeah.
I would love to know more about this. Message me or whatever. And I was like, oh, wild. I would love to know more about this. And we connected and did a virtual session. And it was one of the recent, very exciting developments in my life. What we got to experience is something that has been the topic of conversation between me and many people, because when I put it on social media, it got a massive response in my personal circle and in my professional life too. Many people talked to me about it. And so it was such a really cool sort of moment in my life. Some people don't believe it. They choose not to lean into the experience. So there's a little, I don't want to say mockery, but there's a little like, so how's Molly Brown doing? You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not okay, whatever. And so I don't spend time on them, getting them to, try to lean into it. But then there's some people that really are like, can I take you out to dinner and talk to you about this? I would love to know more. So it's been really exciting since we got to do our session together.
Yes, most definitely. You also shared about, well, first, before I ask the question about your childhood and how you felt about the Titanic, let's just remind everyone who John Jacob Astor is.
Yeah, John Jacob Astor was the richest man on the ship. John Jacob Astor the fourth. So Astor Place in New York City.
Yes.
That's the Astors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he and his wife Madeline were on the Titanic together. And he was the richest man on the ship, and his family could afford to recover the body and bring it back to New York and give him a proper burial in the family plot, which is in Trinity Cemetery on 155th between Riverside and Broadway in New York City.
What is the proximity of your apartment and his grave?
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's like my fiance, not my fiance, my husband. Sorry,
Oh.
Remy. We just got married, so I'm a little like, there are stories that I feel like, I've told so many times that I'm basically like, they were like a monologue, and I feel like I've always said like fiance since then.
Yes,
But
yes.
but my husband, we have this disagreement of what constitutes direct, like right outside of our apartment. And I have this thing like, if you can't take a train to where you're going, where something is, if walking is the only way and there's no reason why you should take a train to get to wherever you're going, it's outside of your apartment. If it's walking distance, it's right outside of your apartment. But he's like, no, it's down, it's a few blocks over, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, it's a few blocks over, but it's outside, it's right outside of our apartment. We can't travel to get there. So that's what I say. So, it's right outside of our apartment. It's, it's like a 5-minute walk, but it's,
That's close.
it's close. And this cemetery, it spans from Riverside to Broadway, and then Broadway runs through it, and then it goes from Broadway to Amsterdam. So it's 2 blocks long and goes from 153rd to 155th. So it's 2 blocks long and 2 streets wide. So it's girthy.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Big. Yeah. She's a big cemetery.
All right. So let's talk about your childhood. Was seeing the Titanic the first like aha moment for you?
Yeah, I saw the movie and I remember seeing it with my grandma, and she was to my left. And I remember watching, the best way that I could describe it was that it was like I was watching a home video. It was
And how old were you?
I was 7.
Okay, 7 years old.
Yes, I was 7. And I remember watching the movie like it was a home video. And I remember being like, emotionally connected to very specific. It was like the first time I was emotionally connected to a story. And I remember certain things, and throughout my life, as I got older and obviously more aware of what a movie is and what, whatever, there were things that I was like, that's not what it looked like. And I remember sort of watching it being like, that was correct. That's what it looked like, or that's what it sounded like. That's not what it sounded like. That's not what it looked like. That didn't happen. And I always sort of felt that, watching the movie. I was still emotionally so invested because, it's such a good movie, but also I was having an emotional reaction. I remember being there. I remember feeling it, like, but I didn't remember it because it didn't happen in this lifetime. So, and also, I'm 7 years old, so I didn't have the language to be like, ah, yes, I think this was my past life. It was,
Right.
it's not like that. It's just an emotional connection when you're that young. And what I started to do is I couldn't stop talking about it. I could not stop talking about it. I was so obsessed with this movie. I was so obsessed with the story of the Titanic. I got books, and I was always in a library, and I was in book fairs and Barnes and Noble and Borders and all these things, bookstores,
Mm.
and couldn't stop talking about it. And my first grade teacher, Mrs. Samuels, was so fed up with me talking about it that she literally sent me out of class in the middle of class and said, Michael, I need you to go to the library, and I need you to look up another shipwreck called the Andrea Doria that sank in the 60s. And I need you to start researching that, because she couldn't hear me talk about the Titanic anymore. So
Okay.
I went home. My grandma picked me up on Tuesdays, and I went home with my grandma, and I was telling her about the Andrea Doria, and this is sort of the basis of my career too, multi-hyphenating, right? She sat me on her lap in front of her electronic word processor, because this is 1998. And
Okay.
she had me we wrote together the Andrea Doria movie, like the Titanic. So it wasn't the Titanic, but it was this new, so it helped me dive more into the story, and learn more about the Andrea Doria. And multi-hyphenating is an artist who has multiple proficiencies which cross-pollinate.
Okay.
And that's what I define as a as she had me listed in the beginning. She was like, directed by Michael Kushner, written by Michael Kushner, starring Michael Kushner, produced by Michael Kushner, which is like the
Wow.
basis of my career. So
Yes.
anyway, yeah. So what's so funny about it is I still have it. I still have multiple copies that we printed, so I still have them. And later on in college, my friends and I filmed it. We wound up filming it in our dorms, which was really sweet and really
Oh
great.
my gosh.
Um, but yeah, and I couldn't stop drawing the Titanic too. Like, if all the like drawings that my grandparents have saved or my parents have saved in boxes, you'll see so many photos, so many drawings of me drawing the Titanic sinking from a very specific,
Oh,
this is
angle from a certain
angle.
angle. Ah, okay.
Yes, which we never talked about, and I discovered later about why that's important. From a very specific angle. I always drew it from a very specific angle.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so I couldn't, I was I was so obsessed with it. I couldn't stop talking about it, and I was so dominated by the emotion of it.
Wow. That's incredible. And so when we met over TikTok and we scheduled your session fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I was pretty excited about guiding you. After speaking to you, learning all about, well, let's just call it a little bit of an obsession, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I knew that you were there. You knew that you were there,
Yeah.
right?
You know,
So, yes, go on.
there's a line in the movie that she says, the she could still smell the fresh paint. The china had never been used. And I know exactly what she's talking about. She says that in the movie, and it always is this emotional thing of like, yeah, I know, I remember what that is. There are certain pictures that I see that come up on my newsfeed of the Titanic that I've never seen before. And some of them, I can't lie. Some of them I don't know what that is, or "Oh, that's cool." But then other photos will pop up, and I'll be like, I was in that room. It's
Wow,
really
that's
wild.
incredible.
Yeah.
So we went ahead and we regressed you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so easy during the induction. I just kept repeating that you were there. We're moving you to the Titanic. And that first scene when you landed, and I haven't heard it in a while, but I remember how you landed and you were outside
Mm-hmm.
looking at it. And I know it's been a while since you experienced it, but let's talk a little bit about what you felt when you saw yourself and you felt yourself there.
Yeah, you know what's so funny is like I would like to do it again with you in terms of like knowing now what I know now about, because I think something's tricky here, right? Like there's a, and I think I asked you this question before we started too. There is a significant cultural representation of this night, of this event that has dominated culture, and it's the 1997 film Titanic. So sometimes I felt that I was watching the memories of me watching the movie. You know what I'm saying? Like I was like, there were some times where it would come into my mind and be like, no, that looks exactly like the same. But it's like, well, maybe that's, maybe James Cameron did a damn good job and it looks similar. But there were things where I was like, I had to not let my Michael Kushner reality influence the reality that we were going back to experience. And it wasn't perfect, right? It's like a state of meditation. Sometimes when you're focusing on something, you get influenced by an emotional source or a physical source that's a tapping outside. Someone starts jackhammering outside right when you're trying to have a relaxing time. I think there are outside things that sort of affect that meditative state, and I had to really focus in and hone in. So when we started in, I remember it felt it was cool because you counted me down and you immediately were like, you're there. What do you see? And it was like this, it was so cool. It was like, so you have no choice but to answer the question, right? What do you see?
Yeah.
What do you experience? And it's a really awesome sort of jumping point.
Yes, and I remember you mentioning that. It's like I'm just trying to stay as clear in what I am being shown versus what I already know of the movie. I remember there was a period where you mentioned that. So let's just kind of tell everyone who you were.
So what was really cool was you asked me who I saw in a mirror. You said there's a mirror there, and who do you see?
Yes, I did ask you that.
And I saw Molly Brown, which was wild because there was always a connection between Molly Brown and me. Kathy Bates's depiction of her in the movie, I was always like, yes, you get him. You are different. You're a ball buster, and you're funny. And I was like, that's who I want to be. You want to get the laughs. You want to be the life of the party, or at least I do. I don't mean to speak for the general you, but I want to be the life of the, but she was an activist. She spoke her mind, and I like to think that I do that. And she was looked down upon by people, judged by people for who she was, new money.
New money, yes.
And I feel that not because of new money, but because of being different, because of being myself and being very very Michael Kushner. Some people, it scares them because I have no problem being emotional. I have no problem being eccentric. I have no problem being spiritual in my own ways and unique in my own ways. And that was relatable. She also, I later researched, and there's a lot of things, we'll talk about the really cool things that bring us together, but she was an actress as well. And she also, there's before I get into that later as well, because this is an important part of the story, but there's a musical called The Unsinkable Molly Brown. She's also in the musical theater lexicon, and that musical specifically has a really important part of my Molly Brown experience, which we'll talk about later. But the closeness of this, but that was really cool. And I think when you say you were asking these things, which was really cool, about what I did next. What did you see? What was there? And I want to know so badly if what I saw was there, because I remember thinking like there was like a notebook that I remember putting down. You asked me
Oh,
something,
yes, yes.
something there.
When they came and knocked on the door in the middle of the night to
Right.
get everyone out, you mentioned going to the door to leave, but then you said, well, let me grab my notebook.
Right.
How interesting that was such a small detail, yet it's what you experienced on the ship.
It's what I experienced, and what I, at least what my my subconscious was telling me in that moment. And like, what was kind of cool about it was I don't know why I didn't do it so close after the session, because I did a lot of research after the session, but I describe her stateroom, and it is a very, I've never seen a photo of it before, but I looked up a photo of it, and I think there's like one photo.
Really?
And it is very close to what I describe.
Okay, I'll have to revisit that. And just
which is
please
cool.
Send that to me. I would love to see it.
Yeah. I found it and I was like, that looks a lot like what I described, which is kind of cool.
Wow. That
Yeah.
is very cool.
Well, also got to remember that my first playbill that I photographed was the Unsinkable Molly Brown revival. Like the first official playbill, like yellow logo, Unsinkable Molly Brown revival. John Jacob Astor and Molly Brown were very close. They boarded the Titanic together from Cherbourg. So I don't know if that first, that first image when you were like, are you like, you're there? I don't know if I was watching the movie of Titanic in my mind and I was settling in, but I think what I described is not what Molly Brown would have seen. I think it was because they boarded from Cherbourg on a separate boat that like went to the Titanic and they boarded together. But John Jacob Astor and Molly Brown had just traveled Egypt together. And I find it to be really interesting that there's a reason why John Jacob Astor is buried right outside of my apartment. It feels like we're still together in that, so I want to talk about that. And also the research that I did, like the length of the session. You went long with me. You went about 2.5 hours, which is about the length of the Titanic sinking.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And also people have sent me things like my journey. Like someone sent me an ashupti, which is an Egyptian talisman for safe travel that Molly Brown had in her coat pocket on the lifeboat, and someone sent me one from the Molly Brown house.
Oh, that's incredible.
So there's some things there that I would like to talk about. And I know I was going to say something else that was like, that's important too, but it, like the head, there's some other stuff, but I'm sure it'll come tell the story a lot.
Okay. Yes. So there were was it strange at all for you to see yourself as a female?
What's interesting is no, because I feel, as a gay man, that I do have a very, a close connection to my femininity. And I think, any straight men listening to this might be like, I don't have any femininity, but I think we all have a touch of masculinity and feminine. Of course. And we all have, we all have the binary and also the non-binary. So it's like, I've also done drag in shows before. And, I've dressed up before Halloween in shows. I'm an actor, right? So there are things. So no, I mean, I think it was a little like, I think there was a little something that questioned it, just because I was like, you're sort of guiding the witness here, because I was like, of course you would see Molly Brown. But what I thought was really interesting was I didn't see Kathy Bates as Molly Brown. I saw the real Molly Brown in the mirror, which was really kind of cool.
Yes, you did. If I'm not mistaken, and see, now I don't know if it was the movie or your experience, how uncomfortable you were in your clothing.
It was my
It
experience.
was your experience.
That's so interesting. And it makes sense because it's like, the new money thing. Like she was dressed up in all of these, clothes, and she did have a masculine side of her, and was known in Lifeboat number 6. Oh, I remember what we were talking about from the drawing, the angle of which we were drawing.
Oh, yes.
But from Lifeboat number 6, she was fighting with the officer in the lifeboat to be like, we have to go back. And she tried to go back, but they wouldn't do it. So like, there was a masculine presence. But yeah,
Right.
I feel, and also probably the life jacket was uncomfortable too. Maybe
Yes.
that's what I was picking up on.
I remember the detail when someone came to knock on the door in the middle of the night, and when you grabbed that the journal or the book, and how you exited your stateroom and you had to pass by the smoking room. See, those are those little details.
Oh, interesting.
Right? That I remember you saying, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. That's such a strange detail to convey. Who knew that there's a smoking room, right?
Right. It's interesting.
And that these men are just kind of smoking out in this room, and the women are being asked to step outside.
Yeah, where like there's, more so what I take from that is that they were ignoring everything, because people were not taking it seriously.
Right.
And there were people that had to knock a bunch of times in, being like, please put on a life jacket and go outside, go to the boat deck. And people then, once it was too late, people started to panic. But a lot of the men, like, really, there's Isidore and Ida Strauss, right? The two Jewish founders of Macy's. And there were,
Yes.
they were gonna have her board a lifeboat, and then when she discovered that he wasn't allowed, she was like, I've never left your side in 50 years. I'm not going to start now. And then they, went to their stateroom and died together. And it's like, there's so many stories like that. Benjamin Guggenheim went down with the ship. John Jacob Astor went down with the ship. There were so many people. I mean, so many people that went down.
Wow. Now, did you ever have dreams when you were younger? Does that feel familiar at all to you? Or was it more just that emotional connection once you saw the movie?
I don't know. I don't know about like sleeping dreams, but like when I would draw the Titanic, it felt like daydreams because I'd get lost. And you got to see these drawings. I got to find them. But for a 7-year-old, they are so detailed, and they're always from the same perspective. And what I later discovered is that it is, I think, where Molly Brown's Lifeboat number 6, where it wound up going away from the Titanic, is she would have seen the perspective. And in the past life session, you asked me what was I seeing in the session?
Yes,
I was watching the Titanic sink from that
same angle
that I had been drawing my whole life.
Wow. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. So I remember that what was really interesting was when the Corsican, is the Corsican? Or
the Carpathia.
Carpathia. Where did I get that? Okay.
Well, there was the Californian. You kind of combined them, which I like. There's the Californian, which was about 4 hours away, and they think it conveniently didn't like hear the distress call or something, but it's said that they were ignored. And then the Californian was like 2.5 hours away. It was close. They could have like come. The Carpathia was 4 hours away. So they tried getting there as soon as they could. But there was the Californian and Carpathia. Yeah.
Okay. I remember how you mentioned in your session how you were helping others off the boat into the Carpathia.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So this was one of the fact things that blew my mind afterwards.
Mhm.
So you asked me, what are I'm on the Carpathia, what is happening? And I kept saying, I'm given a job, I have a responsibility, I don't know.
Yeah.
And what I researched later was that the survivors of the Titanic aboard the Carpathia um elected Molly Brown to be the chair of the survivors committee.
Wow.
So I would say that's a job. They're telling me I have a job. And I said that in the session. I was like, I have a job. They're telling me I have a job. And I did. And
Yes.
I did not know that at all. That is not something that was in the movie. That was not something I recall reading about. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that was so interesting. And I know we did follow up and we spoke, and you were doing some fact checking.
Yeah.
What really surprised us both, because when we see the movie Titanic, who knew that Molly Brown continued to exist? Right?
Yeah.
That's not something. I watched the movie. It was great, and it was all about Jack and Rose, right?
Right.
But she did continue to exist
Yeah.
outside of the Titanic. And I loved the part when you arrived to so tell me, you know more about this, but the Carpathia arrives to New York. Okay. And I remember you saying there's a lot of press
Yeah. There
there.
was. And
There
I
was a
know
lot of press. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And I know historically there was too. Um,
Sure.
I don't think I've ever seen the photos until after, but the people lining up in the piers, I think it's Pier 17, um, here in Manhattan, downtown, and there was a lot of people there. There was a lot of press there. There was also, newspapers. Someone from TikTok sent me a newspaper. It turns out it's not a real newspaper, but it looks like it, but it's still hanging up in the living room. And it's the Boston Globe, 1,500 people die in Titanic sinking. And there was a lot of press, there's uh, there was a cave explorer named Floyd Collins who in 1925 got caught underground, and it was the biggest, the way that they described how big the news story was it was the biggest news story since the Titanic. And
Wow.
the Titanic it was a big story. It was really big.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
was.
God himself could not sink this ship. We're going to plow it. Some of the richest, most influential. Think about a ship like that happening today and getting all of the biggest TikTok stars. You know what I mean? It's
Yes,
like
yes.
something like that. The biggest movie stars, the biggest, bankers. Like, these people were huge. It was the Strausses, Benjamin Guggenheim.
Yes, yes.
There's a theater on Broadway called the Hudson Theater. It's currently where Alex Edelman's Just for Us is playing. And that theater, the impresario of that theater, the theater creator, owner of that theater, died on the Titanic. Him and his wife were on the ship, and she survived and continued to run that theater. And so that the history is everywhere.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So watching you on Zoom during the session, I noticed that you became uncomfortable. You were
Yeah.
squinting a lot. You were
Yeah.
squinting,
Yeah. This is the
and
best.
it really is. You were rubbing your head with your hand, squinting. Your voice dropped. You appeared uncomfortable, and you mentioned that your head was hurting.
Yeah.
Now, when I mention that Molly Brown continued to exist, yes, she did. And There was also, you had to check into a hotel. You had nothing, no clothes, no nothing. You had nothing, right? So
Right.
somehow Molly Brown was able to check in, probably Western Union, sent some money,
Right.
right? That would be typical of that time. And you stayed in a hotel until you took a train home.
That's what I said in the,
In the
so
You took a train home. When I asked you, where do you think you're going? Do you remember what you said?
no, did I say Denver?
You did.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
And
that's, yeah.
yeah, you did. And so who knew that Molly Brown lived in Denver,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I actually knew. So I'm going to
I didn't
say
know that. Okay.
I knew that
You
because
did.
of the Molly Brown house. And I know that she was from Denver. I know that for a fact. So I'm
Yes.
now the thing is like I just, well, not my subconscious, my main
Mhm.
conscious. I don't know if she went there directly, but in the past life session, I remember seeing a train.
Yes.
There's a hotel, a train, and then I was in Denver. Um, and then at the end, I was feeling that headache.
Yes.
And Mayra, I gotta tell you, I never have headaches. Even when I'm
Mhm.
hungover, I don't have headaches. I'm like uncomfortable and nauseous or whatever, but like I don't have like the pounding headache. I don't get headaches. I've had maybe a handful of headaches in my life where I'm literally like, this is a headache. At the end of the session, this was one of them, and it was bad. And you could see the visual representation of it in the recording.
Yes.
When I did my research, I learned that she had died of a brain tumor,
Yes. I
which,
remember you emailed me and I'm like, what? Yes. So that would explain you were receiving the physical symptoms of,
yes, wild.
yeah, yeah, that was. So I would absolutely love to do this again.
Oh, cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Absolutely, we should do it again. Um, what else would you like to share? And then I can
I think,
maybe.
I sort of, when people ask me about it, and trust, a lot of people ask me about it. First of all, I always say the Titanic comes to me at least once a day. So, and I know that I'm spiritually connected to it because I was photographing a group of college kids uh in Sarasota, the Florida State, the FSU grad students for acting.
Mm.
And I flew down with my makeup artist. My makeup artist and friend knows, all about my past life stuff. And she's very supportive of it. Love her, Sarah. And they took us out to dinner. So to have like a big conversation about how headshots were going to go the next day. And I said, that we were outside. It was noisy. There were people, um, like in fair proximity, but not, and it was not close enough for them to like hear like our conversation clearly. And I
Mm.
was telling them, I told them the story of the past life session, and I said, the Titanic comes to me, it comes to me every day. There's a reference, someone will say something, whatever, and they're like, oh, that's so interesting. And then about 5 minutes later, a guy from a table over there just screams out something about the Titanic. And I was like, and everyone literally like basically dropped their fork. And I was like, told you. And they were like, you're kidding. And I was like, there's no reason why they could have heard me. I also remember when I was studying abroad in London, um, this was during the Costa Concordia sinking. The Costa Concordia had just sank off the coast of Italy. And London has a lot of Titanic history, right? And I remember landing in Heathrow, and I think the ship had sank the day before, something like that.
Mhm.
We landed, and the news of like the Evening Standard or something were like, it was just like the Titanic. And I was like, yeah. But,
Wow.
the big one recently was the
The
Titan
Titan.
submersible.
Yes. How was that? How did that affect you? And what was that like for
I
you
gotta
too?
tell you, what's so wild about this is Molly has been on my mind in this, and I'll tell you why. So, my past life experience, many people know about it in the industry.
Mhm.
And I actually was reached out by the Post, the New York Post. And I declined because what they were asking me felt very like they were gonna like make fun of me, because the Post is like
Oh,
that. The Post is like tabloidal.
oh,
It's not, the Post is not great vibes. So
okay.
um so I declined because they were like, so we were told that like um you were Molly Brown in a past life. So like, does Molly have anything to say about this? Like, is Molly
That's just silly.
right? Is
Mm.
Molly coming to you? Is like, and the way that they were asking the questions was very like condescending, and just the energy was very like, oh boy, you're gonna like, the headline will be like, you know, New Yorker believes he's Molly Brown, coming to
Mm.
him, telling him about. I'm like, I have medium tendencies, but I think we all have medium tendencies. I'm not a psychic,
Right.
and she's not coming to me. It's not like I don't wake up and I'm like, Molly said to say this. It's not like that. It's just I have this deep connection, and we share a lot of similarities. And if I dig deep into my subconscious, I can connect with her past experiences. Like, we share some sort of spiritual DNA together, some sort of part of our heart or our spirit, like
Of course.
a part of her came to me. She's probably in some other people as well. There's no, I watch her TikToks, and there are some really deeply spiritual um ideas you bring forward, and things that have to
Mm.
do with other planes and other spaces and times. And
Yes.
I find that to be, and I find that to be, I think someone could easily look at it and go, that's a whole bunch of hooey. But I want to go,
Sure.
how do you know this? How do you know that that's a whole bunch of, why can't you lean into that and believe it? Why can't
Mm.
you believe that a potential other dimension of spirituality, chances are you
Exists.
right, and chances are you're probably a religious person. So if you believe in heaven, hell, God, whatever it is, why can't you just as much believe in something that is, you know, a different version of that? You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's really interesting.
Yes. And there's a lot of comments, people that don't believe it, and that's okay. You're not there. You're just simply not there. But to dismiss someone else's experience,
And
that's what I don't like.
that's why I get weird with TikTok, because I'm so
Yeah,
glad it brought me to you, of course. But the theater industry TikTok is it lacks discovery. It lacks inquisitiveness. It's so it's so self-focused that
mhm.
why you're such a breath of fresh air is because you create content that asks questions, that begs discovery.
Yes.
And musical theater majors and actors,
Yep.
the ego can be big.
Sure.
And so it's such the one reason, the thing that I do like about TikTok is when it is so removed from the entertainment industry, when people aren't trying to cancel anyone, when people are trying,
Yes.
when people aren't trying to expose people, when it literally is just like metaphysical exploration or spiritual
Mm.
exploration or dogs or
Oh,
baking videos.
yes. Dogs. I can watch dog adoption videos
Oh
all
my
day.
God.
That's it. That's it.
Yep.
I'm happy. I am
I
happy.
love that. I love that. When they
Yes.
show videos of shelters that are empty,
Yes, yes.
It's the best. But I'm so thankful for what you do. And it's
Yeah.
so needed and so great because it's like, yeah, like don't yuck someone's yum. If you're listening to this on TikTok, don't yuck someone's yum. And people like to just say, it's really amazing how many people will just like comment and be like, I don't believe in this. It's like, oh, okay, what did that do? What did that do?
That's okay.
It's
Yeah.
so
And I get a lot of
strange.
that. I do. I get a lot of that. Do you have any art or memorabilia? You can't really have, not, you know what I'm saying? Not memorabilia from the Titanic, but do you have personal things like that in your home?
So I have things that are not like, I have like replicas. So I have the Ashupti that Molly Brown had on the lifeboat. That was another thing in the session was you asked me who's on the lifeboat, and I said all women, 2 men, 1 child, which is historically accurate. And um I have that Ashupti, which is the traveling talisman.
Okay. Do you travel with it?
I don't. It's on my
Okay.
it's just on my shelf. I
Gotcha.
have so I got that massive Titanic Lego set that was like $800. That was on back order for months. I got it and because I had COVID and I was in bed and I literally like got the email alert that it was back in stock and because I was in bed, I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, and I got it.
Did
And
you
it took,
finish it?
oh yeah, it took me 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. It's 10,000 pieces and it
Oh
like
my gosh.
moves inside. It's really cool. I have a lot of Titanic stuff, but not like it's not, my house is certainly not a Titanic museum. There is one thing that I could get that I'm choosing not to because, so Beth Malone, who was Molly Brown in the Unsinkable Molly Brown revival off Broadway,
Okay.
who I photographed, Broadway Tony nominee. We love her. She's amazing. She has like a piece of coal that someone gave her that was on the Titanic. And she wants to give it to me. And I'm like, I don't want it. I don't because
Wow.
because that's like for me, it feels a little, it feels that's in it. It's a grave. It's a big grave. And that was
Morbidity.
yeah, and that was the sort of so here's another issue I had with TikTok, right? Was when the Titan submersible thing was happening. There were people on TikTok that were literally saying that they should die. And that if you are worried about, and these were videos, this wasn't like
Wow.
comments. This was like people making videos being like, if you are thinking that these people should die, you're not incorrect. And I was like, what side of TikTok am I on? And it was this like eat the rich mentality, right? It was like the rich should die.
Ah,
And
yes.
and I was like, I don't think that is the solution. I think,
Mm.
if they were trapped down there, that's worse. That is whoa. But we found out that they weren't. Ultimately, if they were going to go and it was going to, they were going to die, which they did, unfortunately, that might have been the best case scenario in the way in which they went, the implosion, which is horrible to say. But I think they could have survived and learned their lesson and altered that hubris, which is exactly the reason why the Titanic sank. And I think we're all upset at this guy who, aided in the death of these 4 people,
Yeah.
including a 19-year-old. I think the company needs to be held accountable in that way. But to wish him to die is a weird thing. And to wish them all to die is a weird thing.
Yes.
Even the kid, it's like, do you remember being 19 years old? Do you remember wanting the approval of your father and you would do anything to get his approval? Like people were like, and like holding the kid accountable in the same way. And it's like,
Yeah.
you don't remember what it was like trying to get your parents to like what, like stop. You don't know, like, you don't, your prefrontal cortex is not formed until you're 25. Decision making is not a thing yet, really.
Mm.
And like, if your dad says that you're going to do this and you hope to bond, like, damn, like, that's
Right.
what, like, that's it. You are being insensitive. My point is, the Titanic is a grave, and it's like, I don't necessarily think that there should be like casual travel to the Titanic, but I what Bob Ballard and James Cameron do for the Titanic, trying to preserve it and understand more history and things like that, it's done respectably, and it's done from the perspective of science.
Wow. Well, thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Mayra.
sharing. I'm going to be sharing your session in the next segment. So I
Cool.
really appreciate you meeting with me and just revisiting your Titanic experience. I am ready to go when you are. So you let me know when you want to go. And if there's something, do you want to maybe visit a little bit more about Molly Brown's youth, right?
Yeah.
We can do that. We can go into places before, the Titanic. And if you want, we can also travel to another lifetime and see who else you've been. We can
I've
do a double feature.
I love that. I have a sneaking suspicion I have a connection with ancient Egypt,
Ah, okay.
which I know a lot of people do as well.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Those are
But
some of my favorites.
I
Mhm,
think I built, I'm Jewish, but in this lifetime, but I think I built pyramids.
mhm.
I think I was, yeah.
Well, your intuition has been spot on so far,
Yeah.
so you're probably right.
Yeah. Mayra, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I really enjoyed this. I hope everyone else listening out there can learn something today, and I'm looking forward to sharing your session in the next segment. So thank you, Michael, so
Thanks,
much.
Mayra. All right, I'm good to go.
You are good to go.